My name on the clay tablet was Ardash, runner of the high road, paid in bread that tasted like dust and threats that tasted like policy. I carried sealed words between forts for men who never ran and never bled for the messages they wrote. The plateau knew my feet better than it knew their names. The storm came sideways over the ridge like a black eye opening. Wind shoved grit into my teeth. Clouds dragged low enough to scrape the thorn scrub. I should have dropped into a ditch and waited for the sky to finish its tantrum. Instead, I was mid-slope with a leather satchel, 3 unbroken seals, and a prayer I did not believe. Late posts earned stripes, dead posts earned replacements. The tablet in my satchel had already been delayed by a washed-out ford and a mule train that refused to yield the narrow. I chose speed over shelter because hunger is a better teacher than courage, and I was already hungry. Lightning walked the far mesas first, white fingers testing rock. Thunder arrived late and angry. My strap had iron nailheads where the leather had been mended thrice. I felt the air go thin and sweet, the way it does before a strike, and I knew I had made a mistake large enough to end a career or a life. I did not drop the satchel. Dropping sealed post was a flogging offense, even if the sky itself demanded it. I angled my body downhill, knees soft, eyes half shut against the grit. The road was a pale scar on darker stone. Far below, the fort would be a square of mud brick and watchfulness. Between me and that square lay half a league of exposed slope and a sky that had decided to argue with iron. The first bolt hit a standing stone off the trail and split it with a sound like a god cracking a knuckle. Heat slapped my cheek, my hair lifted. The world smelled of burned time and wet dust. I ran because standing still felt like volunteering. Rain came in hard coins, then in sheets. The path turned to grease under my sandals. I skidded, caught myself on a thorn branch, and tore my forearm open in a neat red line. Blood mixed with rain and ran into my palm. I wiped it on my tunic and kept moving. Pain was information. Information was better than fear if you sorted it quickly. I had run this road in heat that cooked eggs on dark rock. I had run it in frost that made the breath hang like wool. Storms were rarer on the high road, and rarer still were storms that hunted a single man. This one felt personal in the way bad luck always does when you are alone. A second bolt hit closer, turning the world white, then purple, then absent of color. My ears rang. I tasted metal. The satchel strap jumped against my chest as if something had plucked it. I cursed the nails, the thrifty mender, and every captain who paid in bread instead of proper gear. Below the switchback, a dry wash waited, shallow but lower than the open spine of the ridge. I aimed for it. My calves burned. I was still only a runner with cracked lips and short black hair plastered to my skull. No secret waited behind my heart yet. No second hunger, just legs, fear, and a job. The plateau does not care for titles. It cares for footing, water, and whether you arrive before the seals soften in heat or crack in cold. I had arrived late before and talked my way past a watchman's sneer with the truth dressed as weather. Weather is a respected liar on the high road. Everyone has been delayed by it. Everyone will be delayed again. I hit the wash and dropped to one knee, satchel hugged to my ribs, water already braided down the channel in dirty ropes. Lightning stitched the cloud belly overhead. I counted between flash and thunder the way children count, as if numbers could bargain. The gap shrank. The storm was walking down the ridge toward me with purpose. I thought of my mother only once, which was once more than useful. She had told me the sky was a roof that leaked fire when gods argued. I had stopped believing in gods the year a tax collector took our best goat and left a receipt that meant nothing in a hungry winter. Belief did not feed. Running did. Another flash, closer. The iron nailheads ticked against my collarbone like tiny teeth. I tore at the strap to strip it off and failed because my fingers were wet and stupid with haste. The leather had swollen, the buckle stuck. I was still fighting the strap when the world chose me. White erased the wash, the ridge, the idea of distance. Sound arrived as pressure more than noise. Every joint in me tried to open at once. I smelled my own hair burn. The satchel jerked. Something brighter than thought poured along the iron and into my chest as if my ribs were a doorway that had been waiting for the right knock. I should have died on that slope, with seals blackened and a late post finally excused by corpse. The high road keeps many quiet graves. Mine would have been one more shallow scrape under scrub, marked by nothing but a satchel no one would risk retrieving in a storm. I did not die. The absence after the strike was worse than the strike. Rain still fell, stones still pressed my knees, but inside me a hollow that had never announced itself clapped shut like a mouth around stolen fire. Heat punched behind my heart, my back arched, my teeth cracked together hard enough to send pain up into my skull. For a long second I was a rope stretched between sky and stone, and both ends pulled. Then the light left the air and sat heavy in my gut. I lay smoking in the wash while dirty water rose around my ankles. The satchel smoldered at one corner. My hair stank. When I finally breathed out, a thin, bright thread left my lips and burned a black coin spot into the mud. I stared at that little ruin until rain filled it and turned the ash to paste. I laughed until I coughed blood, because the alternative was screaming until the plateau learned my name, and names spoken too loudly on the high road become property of captains, priests, and men with chains. I pressed my forehead to cold stone and waited for the world to decide whether I was still allowed to stand. The seals were wet, one edge charred. My job was not finished. Whatever had opened in me would have to wait its turn behind duty, or it would get us both killed before sunset. I did not die. Dying would have been simpler and would have required less explanation later. I rolled onto my side and vomited rainwater and bile. Nothing bright came out that time. The heat stayed put, pacing behind my breastbone like an animal learning the size of a new cage. Each heartbeat shoved warmth into my arms and back into the hollow. I pressed both palms to the mud and pushed up until I was on hands and knees. The satchel still hung from me. One seal was scorched at the edge but unbroken. The other two looked merely wet. That detail mattered more than my burned scalp. Unbroken seals meant I might still be a runner instead of a story people told to frighten apprentices. I checked my hands, fingernails black at the rims, palm lines pale against darker grime. No holes, no missing fingers. The tear on my forearm from the thorn had cooked shut into an ugly glazed ridge, as if a smith had touched it with a hot nail and decided that was enough medicine. I flexed the arm. It hurt. Hurt was honest. Honesty from the body is the only honesty you can trust when the sky has just tried to rewrite you. Standing took 3 tries. The slope tilted in ways geometry did not approve. Thunder still muttered eastward, already bored with me. The storm dragged its black hem toward the next ridge, leaving the wash loud with runoff and the smell of ozone thinning into ordinary wet dust. I touched my chest, skin intact. Beneath it, the hollow answered with a slow roll of heat, not quite pain, not quite pleasure. Swallow, some deep, uneducated part of me named it, the way a body names thirst without a tutor. The lightning had gone in. It had not come back out, except for that thin, bright thread and the coin of burned mud. I tried to spit again on purpose. A bead of white heat left my tongue and hissed on a wet stone, then died. The hollow dimmed a fraction, as if I had spent a coin from a purse I could not yet count. Joy hit me so hard my knees softened. Joy is dangerous on the high road. Joy makes you stand in the open and admire yourself, while someone with a knife decides you look expensive. I forced the joy down beside the heat and started walking. Each step sent a faint shimmer through my vision, copper at the edges. Too much still sat in me. The second stomach, if that was what the hollow was, had taken a meal meant to kill trees and split standing stones. It held the meal the way a miser holds a last silver piece, tight and proud and a little sick. My ribs felt too narrow for what they now contained. When I breathed deep, something behind the heart pressed outward, polite as a guest who still intends to own the house. I talked to myself under my breath because silence left too much room for panic. You are Ardash, you carry post, you arrive. You do not explain miracles to watchmen. You smell like a forge accident, and that is weather, only weather. The lower road emerged from cloud shadow into late afternoon light that looked almost shy after the storm. Puddles held pieces of sky. My reflection in one of them was a stranger with wild hair and a mouth cracked black at the corners. I scooped cold water and scrubbed until the black smeared grey. It did not fully leave. Heat lived under the skin there now, a stain more than a wound. I adjusted the satchel strap. The iron nail heads were dark, some melted into blunt nubs. I wrapped the worst of them with a strip torn from my undercloth so they would not kiss bare skin again. Lesson 1 arrived without a priest to announce it. Metal calls sky. Sky answers without asking permission. A lizard watched me from a rock with no opinion. I envied it. Lizards do not deliver seals. Lizards do not answer to captains. Lizards do not suddenly contain weather. A caravan of salt mules passed me going the other way, drivers hooded against leftover drizzle. One man stared at the scorch on my satchel and made a ward with 2 fingers. I nodded as if wards were polite greetings and kept my mouth shut. Power without silence is a short road to a cage. That sentence settled into me like a second law beside the first. I tested the hollow again, carefully, the way you test a bad tooth with the tip of the tongue. A ribbon of heat rose into my throat. I clamped my teeth and forced it back down. Sweat sprang across my scalp, though the air was cool. Overfill, I thought, without knowing the word yet. Too much kept too long would cook the pot from inside. The joy cooled into something sharper. Respect, fear wearing a useful mask. By the time the fort walls rose from the plateau, a brown square with a timber gate and a tower missing 2 teeth of brick, my legs had remembered how to be a runner's legs. The heat had stopped trying to climb my throat. It sat lower, heavy, almost content, as long as I did not poke it. I paused outside bowshot and breathed until my face could pass for merely exhausted. Captains read faces the way taxmen read ledgers. Too calm after a storm looks like secrets. Too wild looks like guilt. I aimed for tired and slightly stupid, the expression that earns bread instead of questions. The hollow pulsed once, warm as a coal under ash. I swallowed nothing and felt it settle. Somewhere far back along the ridge, a split stone still smoked. Somewhere in my ribs, the sky's leftover anger waited for orders I did not yet know how to give. I walked the last stretch like a man carrying a second heartbeat and a job he still intended to keep. Mud sucked at my sandals. The gate guards would smell burned leather and hair. I prepared the simplest truth that was still a lie by omission. Storm, late, seals intact, no mention of mouths behind the heart, no mention of coin-black mud, no mention that the day had become edible and that I had taken the first bite without asking whether I was allowed. If the second stomach wanted more, it would have to wait until I was alone. If it wanted out, it would have to learn manners. I was still a post-runner. I still needed the road more than the road needed me. That balance would not last, but it lasted long enough to put one foot in front of the other until the fort's shadow touched my face. The watchman at the timber gate wrinkled his nose before he wrinkled his forehead. "You smell like a forge accident," he said. Rain had plastered his beard into a point. His spear butt rested in a worn cup of stone where 100 men before him had rested spears. "Storm," I said, true enough to pass a lazy inspection. He looked at the satchel, at the blackened strap edge, at my mouth. For a moment I thought he would call for a priest or a medic or simply bar the gate and make me wait in the open until someone braver decided what I was. Then a cart of fodder pushed up behind me, and he waved me through with the bored irritation of a man who had already used up his curiosity for the day. Inside, the fort smelled of horse, onion stew, wet wool, and the sour clay of walls that never fully dried. Men diced under a lean-to. A smith hammered something that did not want to be a horse's shoe. I kept my shoulders low and my eyes on the packed earth path to the captain's office, a room that had once been a storehouse and still believed it was more important than the men who slept in sheds. Captain Vahram sat behind a low table scarred by knives used as paperweights. He was thick through the chest, grey at the temples, eyes the color of old tea. He did not rise. He held out a hand for the satchel without looking at my face first. That was his way. Seals before souls. I set the leather down carefully. My fingers wanted to tremble. I did not allow it. He checked each seal with a thumbnail, turning the packets to the lamp. One charred edge made his mouth tighten. Weather, I said. Ridge took a bolt. I kept moving. He grunted. Late is late. Weather is an essay runner's right when their feet are slow. Still, unbroken is unbroken. He slit the least damaged packet, scanned the tablet, and set it aside as if the words had already bored him. The other two he locked into a chest without reading. Not all post was for captains. Some was for men above captains, and Vahram knew which keys not to invent. He tossed me a heel of bread as if feeding a dog that had not bitten him yet. Eat, you look cooked. I ate. The bread was dense and tasted of ash from a careless oven. Heat paced behind my heart while I chewed, a caged animal learning the bars. When I swallowed, the hollow seemed to taste the bread too, and find it insulting. Real food was dull next to stolen lightning. That thought scared me more than the storm had. Water, Vahram said, nodding at a jug. Then shed. You run east at first light with the reply seals. Try not to arrive smelling like a burned wagon. It unsettles the horses. Yes, Captain. He finally looked at my mouth, black at the corners. Wind, I offered before he asked. Wind is a useful liar. He accepted it the way busy men accept answers that do not require more work. Outside his door, the yard noise rushed back in. I drank from the shared jar near the well, and almost laughed when the water steamed faintly against my tongue. No one noticed. People see what they expect. They expected a late runner with storm luck and bad hygiene. I gave them that shape and nothing else. A stable boy asked if I had seen demons in the cloud. I told him I had seen rain and stupidity, mostly my own. He grinned and went back to scraping hooves. Simple answers keep simple peace. I crossed to the runner's shed, a long, low room with straw pallets, pegs for straps, and a clay lamp that smoked more than it lit. 2 other runners slept already, mouths open, legs twitching through remembered roads. I took the pallet farthest from the door, sat with my back to the wall, and waited for my pulse to stop announcing itself. The hollow rolled. I pressed a fist under my sternum until the roll calmed. Bread sat heavy in my ordinary stomach. Lightning sat brighter in the other. I catalogued what I knew the way I catalogued road hazards. 1. The sky could enter me. 2. A little could leave me as light that burned. 3. Too much still inside made the world copper and my thoughts slow. 4. No one here could be told. Vahram's bread had been a kindness shaped like contempt. I did not hate him for it. Captains live by making men interchangeable. A runner who cannot be replaced is a problem, not a treasure, until someone higher decides otherwise. I intended to remain replaceable in every report and irreplaceable in every private fact. Night thickened. The lamp guttered. I listened to horses shift and a watchman cough on the wall. Ordinary fort music. Under it, my new guest hummed like a plucked wire. I thought of the coin spot in the wash, rain-filled and secret. Evidence is a kind of enemy. I had left too much of it already. Tomorrow I would be more careful. Tonight I only needed to not set the shed on fire in my sleep. I lay down with a wet cloth on my chest, stolen from the wash line and wrung half dry. The cloth warmed against me within breaths. I turned it and warmed it again. Eventually the heat settled into a low banked coal, and exhaustion dragged me under before curiosity could drag me toward experiments. I dreamed of running uphill forever while the sun leaned closer and closer, whispering that I had a mouth built for it. I woke once with my jaw clenched on nothing and forced myself back down into darker sleep where even dreams had to be quiet. I catalogued the fort the way I catalogued roads. North wall thicker, south gate softer hinges, well water mineral bitter, cook who hated runners and therefore undersalted our bowls. These details are the difference between a man who passes through and a man who can vanish through. A clerk tried to dock me a half ration for lateness. I showed him the scorched seal edge and the rain still dark in the leather seams. He sighed the sigh of small power denied and scratched the tally clean. I did not thank him. Thanks imply debt. Debt implies conversation. In the runner's corner of the yard, I stretched calves that still twitched with leftover lightning. Heat under the sternum answered the stretch like a second muscle. I made myself finish the ordinary routine: ankles, hips, shoulders, breath. If the power made me skip the craft of running, the first night without sky would break me. Someone offered dice. I declined. Winning draws eyes. Losing draws mockery. Both are attention. I wanted none. I repaired a sandal thong with sinew and watched the light die along the tower's broken teeth until the horn for night watch made the fort flinch into its evening shape. Before true dawn, I woke because the hollow would not stay asleep. The other runners snored. A rat argued with a sack of grain in the corner. I took a cracked sand bowl from beside the water jar, a thing used for spit and dice and sometimes blood from split knuckles, and slipped outside to the narrow alley between shed and outer wall. The alley held leftover night and the smell of latrines. Perfect. No audience, no priest, no captain with tea-colored eyes. I set the bowl on packed dirt, knelt and opened the mouth behind my heart, a finger's width. Heat rose like nausea in reverse. I aimed with my lips the way a child aims a spit for distance and dignity. A bead of white left me and hit the sand. The grains fused in a spiderweb of orange, glowed, then sank to dull glass freckles. The bowl's rim ticked as it cooled unevenly. My hands shook with joy so pure it felt criminal. I could eat the day. I could answer men who thought thunder belonged only to kings and old temple fires. I could make a late post into something the road itself respected. I did it again, smaller, a hair-thin thread. It drew a black comma on the bowl wall and died. The hollow dimmed. I learned in that tiny spend that release had a cost counted in remaining warmth. Spend too freely and I would be empty. Empty hurt in a different key than full, a hollow ache like hunger after a fever. I practiced until the bowl cracked clean down one side. Then I forced myself to stop. Appetite is a second captain. It does not care if you hang. It does not care if the fort wakes to a glow in the alley and decides you are unclean fire wearing a man's skin. I buried the cracked bowl under loose dirt against the wall and stamped it flat. Evidence is an enemy. I wiped my mouth until the black corners faded to ordinary chapped skin in the half-light. Then I returned to my pallet and pretended to sleep until the yard horn sounded. First light run meant seals, water skin, and the East Road. Varam's clerk handed me 2 fresh packets with wax still soft. "Do not melt these with your dramatic weather," he said, and thought himself funny. I smiled with my mouth only. Outside the gate, the plateau opened clean and cold. The storm had washed the dust out of the air. Distance looked sharper. Every metal tip on carts and harnesses glittered like food. I felt the hollow lean toward the glitter, and I clamped it shut with will alone. Will is a muscle. It tires. I would need more than will. I would need rules. On a flat stretch, I stopped beside a thorn bush and tried to sip the morning sun the way I had spat heat. Face tilted up, teeth parted, breath drawn as if the light were steam off soup. Something thin and bright scraped down my throat. It was not lightning. It was slower, meaner, a continuous thread rather than a punch. It stayed. The hollow stretched, pleased, and my vision went briefly copper at the edges. I stopped at once. Overfill risk was no longer theory. My pulse hammered in my temples. Sweat ran cold down my ribs, though the air still held dawn chill. I sat on my heels and breathed until the copper faded and the hollow stopped trying to climb my throat like boiled milk. Too much, and I would cook myself on an empty road with no one to kick dirt over the stain. Too little, and the next ambush would find only an ordinary runner with a knife and bad odds. The space between those failures was going to be my entire education. I ran on, storing a little, leaving a little, tasting the morning without drowning in it. Control is how monsters become legends instead of cautionary ash stains. I did not want to be a stain. I wanted to be a problem for other people. Near a stone marker, I tested aim. A dry thistle stood 2 paces off the path. I pointed 2 fingers, pushed a needle of heat along the line of sight, and watched the thistle blacken and curl without bursting into open flame. Smoke rose thin and white. I stamped it out and scattered the ash. Small, precise, repeatable. My smile hurt my burned lips, and I did not care. A shepherd on a far slope raised a hand in greeting. I raised mine back and kept running before he could decide the smoke needed a story. Stories travel faster than runners. Stories reach temples. By the time the sun cleared the eastern teeth of the mountains, I had a working name for the thing in me. Second stomach, not holy, not royal, just a gut that wanted sky. Naming it made it less like possession and more like a tool with teeth. Tools can be mastered, possessions master you. I whispered the name once into the wind and then refused to say it aloud again that day. Names are handles. I was not ready for anyone else to pick this one up. Between experiments, I forced ordinary tasks. Water skins filled, strap waxed, knife edge stoned. The hollow hated delay. Delay was the point. A power that cannot wait is a power that will choose the worst moment for you. I tried storing heat while jogging in place behind the shed, then releasing on the 5th step, then the 7th, learning whether motion ruined aim. Motion ruined aim until I stopped trying to be graceful and started being simple. Point, exhale, stop. Grace can come later if I lived. A cat watched from the wall top, pupils thin. When a bead of heat cracked the bowl, the cat left without drama. I took that as fair review. If I could not be trusted by a cat, I had no business near men. Later, on the road, I used a dead thistle patch as a private range and counted misses out loud so the number would shame me into better work. Shame is a cheap coach and sometimes an honest one. By the 10th thistle, I could blacken a stem without igniting the whole stand. That felt like the first true skill, not the first true miracle. Miracles are accidents that survive. Skills are accidents you can repeat on purpose. They hit the lower switchback at a bend where the road pinches between a drop and a wall of layered rock. 6 riders, local enough to know late posts travel light, professional enough to wait until the fort was a rumor behind a ridge and help was a prayer with no legs. I was alone on the return stretch with an empty satchel and a full secret. The morning sip still glowed low behind my heart. Not a storm's worth. Enough. They circled without hurry. Dust rose in soft ropes. One man with a spear and a face like cracked leather leveled the point at my chest. Horse, he said. Clothes, life if you crawl. I looked at their mounts, their patched tack, the way 2 of them kept glancing upslope as if expecting a second party. Ambushes fear ambush. That was useful. Fear makes gaps. I crawled 1 step because humility is a tool. Then I opened the mouth behind my heart and let a fraction of swallowed storm out along my pointing hand. The spear point softened, glowing cherry, then white at the tip. The man screamed and dropped it, palms seared. The smell of cooked skin cut through horse and dust. Horses panicked in a chain reaction of white eyes and clattering hooves. One rider went off on the drop side and slid in scree, cursing gods who were not listening. I stood. The hollow kicked, eager. I kept the release small. Small is control. Control is survival after the fight as much as during it. Horse, I said. Clothes. Life if you ride away now. 2 of them tried bravery because shame is heavier than sense. One spurred at me with a short sword. I stepped aside from the first cut, felt wind of iron by my ear, and breathed a brighter ribbon across his shield. The wood blackened in a clean fireline. Leather straps crisped. He flung the shield, slapped at his sleeve where sparks had kissed cloth, and his horse did the rest, bolting back down the switchback with him clinging like a man who had suddenly remembered childhood prayers. The second brave one raised a bow, string to cheek. I did not wait to learn if he was good. A needle of heat took the bowstring. It snapped with a sound like a dry twig. The arrow jerked sideways and skittered uselessly into rock. His eyes went wide in a way that had nothing to do with tactics. "Demon," someone sobbed from the dust. "Late post," I said, and my smile hurt my burned lips. They broke, not all at once. Breaking has a rhythm. First the horses decide, then the men invent reasons. I walked through the space they left as if the road had chosen a new owner. I did not chase. Chasing turns defense into spectacle. Spectacle writes itself into tavern songs and temple reports. One man, the spearman with cooked hands, tried to crawl for his weapon. I put my sandal on the spear shaft and looked down at him until he stopped. "Go," I said. "Tell your friends the high road taxes greed now." He went, stumbling. Leaving a dropped knife, I kicked into the drop without examining. I did not want their steel. Steel calls sky, and I already had enough arguments with weather. When the last hoofbeats faded, I sat down hard on the warm stone of the bend and swallowed nothing but air until the second stomach stopped kicking. Empty, it hurt. Full, it hurt. Power was not gentle. Power was mine. My hands shook, not from fear exactly, but from the aftertaste of joy. I had burned men without a sword. I had rewritten an ambush into a retreat with breath and aim. The plateau looked the same. I did not. I checked myself for injuries I might have ignored. A bruise rising on my hip from a stumble, a scrape on one knee, no arrows, no cuts. The worst wound was the hunger already asking for more sky to replace what I had spent. I denied it again. Appetite is a second captain. I repeated that until the words had edges. I buried the worst scorch marks with dirt and boot soles. The melted spear tip I wedged under a rock ledge where runoff would hide it. Evidence is a kind of enemy. So is pride that wants a trophy. Then I ran, not toward the fort yet, but along a side track that looped me back to the main road farther on, so any watcher would lose the clean line from ambush to my arrival. Paranoia is just planning with better posture. By midday, the heat I had spent was a memory, and the sun was a full purse overhead. I did not feast. I stored a measured thread. Copper threatened the edges of my sight, and I stopped. The lesson wrote itself in sweat. There is a brim. Crossing it is not power. Crossing it is cooking. When the fort finally rose again from the brown distance, I composed my face into ordinary fatigue. If the bandits talked, they would talk like madmen. Madmen are ignored until enough of them say the same impossible thing. I needed time before enough became a number that mattered. I touched the satchel strap where nails no longer shone and entered the gate as if I were still only Ardash. Late sometimes, lucky often, dangerous never. After they fled, I walked the bend twice, once as victor, once as investigator. Scuff marks, a dropped water skin, blood from a palm on pale dust, already darkening. I poured dust over the blood until it was only darker dust. Then I listened. Road silence is never empty. Insects, stone tick, wind in scrub, no second party, good. I drank from my skin and found the water warm against my tongue faster than it should have been. The hollow was bleeding heat into everything I touched. I wrapped my hands in cloth before I handled the seals packet, still empty on my return. Absurd caution for empty leather. Necessary caution for a man whose skin had become a poor chimney. Far downslope, one rider had stopped and looked back. I did not gesture. I did not chase. I stood still until he decided the story in his head was large enough and spurred away. Stories need distance to become demons. I gave him distance like a gift with a hook in it. Then I ran, not fast, not glowing, just a courier late for nothing and early for the rest of his life. Demon, one of them had sobbed. The word followed me into the fort like a burr under cloth. I delivered nothing that run, only myself and a carefully blank face. Varam did not ask about bandits. Captains assume the road is always trying to kill runners and are only surprised when it succeeds. I drank watered wine in the yard and listened. By evening, the story had arrived ahead of any wounded pride, carried by a salt trader who swore 6 riders had met a devil in courier leather. The devil breathed forge fire. The devil melted iron with a look. The devil laughed with black lips. Men love a devil more than they love a competent man. Devils explain fear without demanding self-improvement. I sat among them with a bowl of onion stew and laughed at the right places. "Late post," I said when someone glanced my way, as if sharing a private joke with myself. My smile hurt. I let it. Pain keeps performances honest. A veteran named Rostam, scar through one eyebrow, watched me longer than the others. "You came in with storm stink 2 days back," he said quietly when dice pulled the loud ones away. "Now this. Weather and bandits," I said. "Both stupid, both survivable." He grunted. "Survivable is a word men use before the temple starts asking questions. Keep your head down, runner. Heads that glow get collected." I thanked him as if he had advised me about blisters. Inside, the hollow rolled at the word temple. Future argument, future hunt, not yet. That night, I did not experiment. I lay on straw and practiced being ordinary, until ordinary almost fit again. Ordinary is armor. Ordinary is also a cage. I would wear it until I could afford a better metal. Sleep came in pieces. In one dream, the spearman with cooked hands held up his palms like pages of a book, and the wounds spelled my name. I woke tasting copper and forced the heat down until my jaw ached. Near midnight, a drunk on the wall shouted that he saw fire on the eastern ridge. The watch investigated and found nothing but a shepherd's abandoned brush pile, still faintly warm from days ago. Men relaxed into mockery. I did not. Coincidence is a story you tell when you refuse pattern. Pattern said my secret had a half-life measured in gossip, not years. I rose before the horn and washed at the trough. The horse there shied when my hands entered the water. A faint hiss rose. I apologized under my breath to the animal for the heat I could not fully hide. The horse forgave nothing. Animals are better witnesses than men. They do not invent demons. They simply refuse your hands. At first light, Vahram had new seals and a route that looped me past 2 wayposts and a dry village where runners sometimes traded news for dried fruit. He watched my face while he spoke. I gave him tired obedience. He dismissed me with a flick of fingers that meant he had already moved on to shortages of feed and a missing shovel. On the road, I reviewed the ambush like a drill, where I stood, how much I released, how the horses broke first, how I failed to control the joy after. Joy is a leak. Leaks are found. I also reviewed what I had not done. I had not killed all of them. Mercy was not kindness. Mercy was strategy. Dead men become martyrs or mysteries. Living cowards become unreliable witnesses who contradict each other. 6 stories of a demon are weaker than 1 clean corpse with burn marks no forge can explain. Still, 1 clean spear tip lay under a rock ledge. Rain would help. Time would help. Curiosity would not. At the first waypost, a woman selling flatbread asked if it was true the high road had grown teeth. I bought bread I did not need and told her roads always had teeth. Hers was a kind face. Kind faces spread stories farther because people trust them. I left quickly. By noon, the word demon had company. Witchfire, sky debt, unclean hunger. The plateau has many names for things it does not own. I collected them the way I collected road markers, not to honor them, but to know which paths rumor preferred. Late post, I told my reflection in a still trough at the dry village. The reflection did not argue. Black still ghosted the corners of my mouth when I smiled too wide. I stopped smiling at reflections. I was not a demon. Demons, if they existed, did not deliver tablets on time. I was a runner who had swallowed a storm and lived. The difference would matter to me even if it stopped mattering to everyone else. When I slept that night under open sky between posts, I kept a hand on my chest as if I could hold the hollow shut from outside. It pulsed against my palm, warm, patient, and entirely uninterested in whether men called it holy or damned. I began to track which mouths spread the demon talk. Dice table, stable, well, market stall. Each mouth added a jewel the original fight never held. Wings, glowing veins, a voice like cracked bells. The inflation protected me. The more impossible the tale, the less a serious clerk would stake his career on it. Still, seriousness arrives wearing quieter shoes. A quartermaster asked casually how storms tasted. I told him they tasted like fear and wet wool. He laughed and moved on. Casual questions are often the first teeth of a trap. I filed his face away. On a short local run, I passed two farmers arguing whether to leave offerings at the switchback. One wanted bread, one wanted iron nails as a ward. I almost stopped to tell them nails were invitations. I did not. Advice from strangers is how profiles get drawn. That evening, I sat with my back to shed timber and breathed until the hollow's sulk matched my pulse. Demon or late post, the road would decide which name stuck. My job was to make late post the only name that came with proof. I practiced saying late post in different tones until each sounded unremarkable. Bored, amused, irritated. The irritated version worked best. Irritated men are believed because irritation is common and demons are not supposed to mind paperwork. At true noon the next day, the sun stood over the plateau like a white nail. Shadows shrank to puddles under stones. Heat shimmer made distant ridges walk in place. This was not storm weather. This was the ordinary tyranny of day, the kind that kills the careless without drama. I stopped on a saddle of rock where the road dipped and no dust trail showed behind or ahead. A lizard watched from a crack. I envied it again. Then I tilted my face up like a fool worshipping and sipped a thread of raw sun through my teeth. It scraped going down. Lightning had been a punch. Noon sun was a rope pulled slow through the throat, bright and endless and unwilling to be portioned. I took a count of 4 heartbeats and closed my mouth. It stayed. The hollow stretched, pleased, warmer than before. My skin prickled, sweat sprang and dried almost at once. Too much and my vision went copper, world-tinted like old coin. I learned the edge by nearly crossing it. Behind my heart, the hollow pushed outward until my ribs ached, a drum skin tuned too tight. I dropped to a knee and exhaled carefully. No release, only breath. The copper faded in waves. Nausea rolled through me and passed. Overfill was not poetic. Overfill was the body warning that the pot would crack and take the cook with it. I waited until I could stand without the horizon tilting. Then I tried again, smaller. 2 heartbeats, a sip, not a swallow of the whole day. The hollow accepted it with something like purring, if heat can purr. Strength spread into my limbs, not muscle swollen, but awake, as if fatigue had been argued into temporary silence. This was the real treasure. Storms were rare. Noon was daily. If I could drink day in measured threads, I would not need to wait for sky violence to arm myself. I would become weather on a schedule. I laughed once, short, and the lizard fled into deeper shade. Even reptiles know when a man has become the wrong kind of neighbor. I practiced release into a patch of bare dirt, etching thin black lines that looked like writing in a language made of scorch. Circles, arrows, a crude map of the bend where bandits had learned new manners. Then I scuffed it all away. Pride wants monuments, survival wants bare dirt. A column of imperial messengers passed on fresher horses an hour later, blue cloth at the shoulders, eyes that measured everything for tax and threat. I stepped off the road and bowed my head like a good courier of lesser rank. One of them sniffed as he passed, frowning, as if he smelled a forge where no forge stood. He did not stop. Blue cloth has schedules. Schedules save lives they never meant to save. When they were gone, I realized my hands had curled into fists hot enough to hurt my own palms. I unclenched, cooled them on stone, and resumed the run with a store of noon banked low and steady. At a well shared by 2 villagers, I paid a copper for a full skin and drank ordinary water until my ordinary stomach sloshed. The second stomach ignored it. Different thirsts, different laws. A girl filling jars asked why my lips looked burned. Wind and sun, I said. She nodded, uninterested. Children of the plateau know wind and sun as family bullies. I sat in the well's thin shade and took stock like a quartermaster. Stored heat, moderate. Headache, fading. Temptation to drink the whole hard sky, present and loud. I spoke 3 rules under my breath to drown the temptation. Never release near allies until aim is habit. Never fill to the brim where enemies can bait another strike. Never explain. Explanation is a leash handed over politely. The rules helped. Rules are rails. Without them, the appetite steers. Late afternoon brought thin cloud, a veil that dimmed the feast without ending it. I felt the hollow sulk, which would have been funny if it were not inside my chest. I fed it nothing and made it wait. Training the stomach mattered as much as training the release. A tool that commands you is not a tool. Near dusk, I climbed a low rise and looked back along the road I had run. Dust, stone, scrub, the faint glitter of a distant fort's signal mirror. Ordinary empire logistics. Under it, invisible to dull eyes, a table where sky could be eaten and spent. I was learning the place settings. I slept that night in a hollow of rock with my satchel for a pillow and woke twice to the sensation of heat climbing my throat. Both times I swallowed it back and counted breaths until it obeyed. Obedience would not be perfect. Perfect is a lie told by people who never held real power. Good enough to wake unburned would do for now. At dawn, I sipped again, 2 heartbeats, no more, and ran with the day quietly on my side. I learned noon has textures, clear noon cuts, dusty noon drags, winter-thin noon barely feeds. Afterstorm noon tastes washed and sharp, like the sky scrubbed its knife. I started choosing when to sip based on texture, not only hunger. A glutton takes any plate. A runner chooses terrain. Once I sipped while walking and nearly walked off the road when copper flooded in. Lesson: stop the feet when you open the throat. The plateau forgives many errors. Gravity forgives fewer. I began pairing sips with landmarks. 2 heartbeats at the leaning marker, 2 at the salt vein. None near villages, none near mirrors of standing water that might throw a glint wrong. Ritual makes discipline sticky. Sticky discipline survives panic. A merchant caravan offered me a ride for coin. I refused. Height on a wagon bed would put my face nearer sun and nearer eyes. Also, I did not trust my stomach around so much metal hardware. I jogged beside them for a polite stretch, then pulled ahead where the road narrowed and their wheels could not follow my pace. By late day, the store sat even and warm. No kick, no climb into the throat. That balance was the real sip of noon, not the light, the stopping. I delivered the next seals with hands that still wanted to tremble and a face trained blank as kiln brick. The receiving clerk at the Eastern Fort was younger than me and proud of his wax. He inspected edges, sniffed the leather, and only then looked at my cracked mouth. "Wind," I said before the question formed. "High road wind." He wrote something on a tally stick and dismissed me with the generosity of a man who believes paperwork is the real spine of empire. In the yard, men diced for onions. The loser would peel for the cook. Laughter cracked like small dry sticks. I wanted to tell no one, and also to burn the dice into glass to prove the world had changed. I chose no one. Secrecy keeps you alive long enough to become inevitable. I repaired my strap with proper sinew and no iron nails. An old mender in the fort market sold me leather patches and advice. "Keep metal off your heart if storms love you," he said, and chuckled at his own folk wisdom. I paid him extra and did not explain how accurate he was. Varam's reply route would take me home through the same country in 3 days. Home meaning the first fort, not a place with family. Runners call the last bed home because sentiment is heavy and we travel light. I took a bowl of lentil mash, ate slowly, and listened. Gossip had grown limbs. The demon of the switchback now had glowing eyes in one version, a crown of sparks in another, and in a third it had spared a child who was not even present. Lies are fertile soil. I walked through them like a man walking through smoke. eyes low, breath shallow. A letter captain from a larger garrison stopped me near the gate. "You are Ardash, storm runner." I said I was Ardash and that storms happen. He smiled with too many teeth. "The road needs reliable feet. Reliable feet get noticed. Noticed feet get better pay and worse masters. Think on it." I thought on it while smiling and nodding. Better pay could not buy silence once a worse master owned the secret. I would not sell what I did not admit having. That evening I found a quiet corner of the stable and practiced tiny releases into a sand bucket half full of old urine-soaked bedding, the kind of mess no one examines closely. Each pinprick of heat died into stink and steam. I counted spends. I counted remaining warmth. I stopped while I still felt heavy enough to matter in a fight. A stable hand almost caught me. I was coughing into my fist as if ill when he rounded the stall. Sick runners are ordinary. Glowing runners are not. He offered water. I took it. Kindness without curiosity is rare. I valued it more than he knew. Night watch changed with a clatter of spears. I returned to the shed and lay among snoring men who would bet onions tomorrow and die of dull fevers next year and never know the sky could be chewed. For a bitter moment, I hated them for their simplicity. Then I hated myself for the hate. They were not my enemies. Curiosity, priesthood, and empire were the mouths that would try to eat me second. I touched the wet cloth to my chest again and waited for sleep. Behind my heart, the hollow turned like a dog in a basket, finding comfort. I did not give it noon. I gave it patience. Patience is also a store. Before dawn, a messenger from the Fire Temple Road arrived with clean robes and cleaner contempt. He did not speak to runners, he spoke to captains. I saw him only in profile, nose sharp, mouth set in the permanent distaste of men who believe flame should be licensed. The hollow rolled hard enough to make me pause mid-step. Sensing, I realized, not thinking, sensing a future argument with men who thought they owned fire. I kept walking. Sparks start priesthoods and pyres. I would give him neither. When I took the road again, seals snug and strap honest, I felt the silence around my secret like a second satchel, heavier than leather, more valuable than any tablet. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is a held breath the size of a life. If I broke it too soon, I would become a weapon on someone else's wall. If I held it long enough, I might become the weather that walls cannot schedule. I ran east into rising light and did not look back at the fort until distance made it small enough to fit under my thumb. Silence has techniques. I practiced them. Do not correct false stories. Correction reveals knowledge. Do not joke about fire. Jokes are confessions wearing paint. Do not refuse food so often that people invent fasting piety for you. Eat, complain about lentils, be dull. When a captain's aide asked if I wanted recommendation to a faster circuit with more silver, I said I liked this circuit's sleep. He looked disappointed, which was perfect. Ambition in the open is a flag. Ambition under the ribs can wait. I wrote nothing down about the hollow. Writing is a second mouth. Clay tablets break and get read by enemies. Memory only, paced to laws. Refreshed each dawn with a 2-heartbeat sip and a refusal to take 3. At night, I listened to other runners talk about women, debts, and blisters. I added a blister story of my own. True enough, and let them like me for being small. Being liked for smallness is excellent cover. Cover is not friendship. I did not confuse the two. Before sleep, I checked the satchel seals by touch in the dark, counting unbroken edges like prayer beads for people who do not pray. The road still had claims on me. I would honor them until honor became a noose. Not yet, not tonight. In the morning, I watched the Fire Temple messenger leave with an escort of 2 bored guards. His clean robe picked up road dust at last. I felt no triumph. Dust on a priest is not defeat of a priesthood. It is weather, the same weather I hid inside. I took my seals and left by the opposite gate while the yard argued about onions. Cloud took the stars 2 nights later on a forced run, carrying plague notice tablets that could not wait for pretty weather. No moon, no sip, no store, only feet, path memory, and a knife. The second stomach woke hungry the moment the cloud sealed the last pale gap. It kicked like a child denied milk. I ran anyway. Plague notice does not care about hollows behind hearts. Villages down road needed the warning before market day gathered too many lungs in one square. Dark on the plateau is not soft. It is a hard dark that makes every stone an ankle's enemy. I shortened my stride and trusted the feel of packed wheel ruts under my sandals. Wind came cold from the north and smelled of distant rain that might never arrive. I passed a gully where men could have taken me easily. Brush thick, sight lines poor. I still moved like prey because prey posture is camouflage. Predators look for the upright confidence of soldiers and the scurrying panic of victims. A tired runner in the middle is furniture. Furniture survives. Something large shifted in the gully brush. Boar or man or both. I did not light the night with heat to see. Light is a confession. I kept my knife low and my breath quieter than the wind, and let the road take me past. Whatever it was did not follow. Hunger without sky forces cunning. That was the lesson the cloud taught better than any captain. Halfway to the next post, my legs shook with ordinary exhaustion. The hollow offered nothing. It had spent what little remained in tiny unconscious leaks I had not noticed until emptiness announced itself as a cold spot behind the heart. I cursed my sloppy accounting. Power without inventory is just delayed failure. I chewed dried goat and kept moving. Ordinary stomach work, ordinary misery. When a runner forgets he is an animal first, the road reminds him. Near a fallen marker stone, I stopped because my left ankle rolled on grit and flared hot. I sat, felt the joint, found swell but no grind. I bound it with a strip from my spare cloth and waited 10 counted breaths for the first sharp edge to dull. In those breaths, the cloud thinned above one seam and a scrap of starlight found my upturned face. I drank it. It did almost nothing. Starlight is thin soup. The hollow accepted it with disdain and stayed mostly empty. I laughed at my own greed, a dry sound in the dark. The second stomach wanted storms and hard noon. I would bring it storms on my schedule, not because it demanded, but because I chose when to be armed. Choice is the difference between a stomach and a master. The ankle held if I favored it. I favored it. Heroes in songs run through breaks and die impressed with themselves. I preferred arrival. At the plague village's outer shrine, a watchman with a cloth over his face took the seals with tongs and did not invite me inside. Smart man. I slept in a field hut upwind, door wedged, knife in hand, hollow sulking through the night like a barred dog. Dawn came grey, cloud still thick. I sipped what pale light existed and got little more than a sour warmth, enough to take the shake out of my fingers, not enough for a fight I would be proud of. I adjusted plans down to knife, terrain, and refusal to be proud. On the return road, the cloud finally tore. Sunlight poured through in wide blades. I did not gorge. I filled to a safe heavy and stopped while copper still slept at the edge of sight. Discipline tasted like metal and victory. By the time I reached open country again, I understood something I would need for every night campaign ahead. The power could be starved. Starving it did not make me helpless. It made me a runner again, which I had been longer than I had been a storm eater. That older self was not a lesser self. It was the foundation the new hunger stood on. If priests ever baited me into gluttony, I would need the memory of this cloud night like a rope in floodwater. I tied that memory tight and kept running. In the deepest dark, I navigated by the feel of camber, the way runoff had carved shallow gutters at the path edges. My ankle spoke on every other step. I answered by shortening stride and refusing pride. Pride is how runners become bones under scrub. When the thing in the gully shifted again farther back, I did not speed up. Speed sounds like prey that knows it is seen. I spat aside, adjusted the satchel noisily, and performed the boredom of a man who believes he is alone. Belief is contagious. Sometimes the night catches it. At a dry stone fence, I rested standing, because sitting makes standing harder on a bad ankle. I recited the seal's destinations under my breath to keep my mind from inventing eyes in every bush. Plague notice to the lower village. Copy to the forward post. Return confirmation. ordinary language, ordinary stakes. People would die if I failed in ordinary ways. That rattled more than my sulking gut. When starlight finally leaked, the thin sip shamed me with how little it gave and how grateful I still was. Gratitude towards sky is the root of temples. I kept mine private and unritualized. No bow, no words, just intake, measure, stop. Dawn's thicker light felt like wages earned. I took them without gloating and ran the last stretch with a knife hand loose and a face ready to be nobody. After delivering the plague notice, I washed my hands in vinegar water the village left outside for messengers, and did not take offense at the distance they kept. Distance is sense during sickness. I would steal that sense for temple season. Keep distance, keep cloth, keep the hollow from coughing light when fear squeezed the ribs. Fear almost made me spark when a dog lunged on a rope near the hut. I bit my cheek until blood replaced heat as the strongest taste, and the dog lost interest in a man who tasted ordinary pain. A fire temple courier shared the road for half a watch on the third day after the cloud run. Clean robe hem dusty only at the last finger's width, beard oiled, eyes like chips of cooled charcoal. He smelled of sacred ash and the kind of soap runners never afford. He fell into step without asking. Men who serve temples often believe roads rearrange themselves around their purpose. "You are the storm runner," he said. "Not a question." "I am a runner," I said. "Storms happen." He sniffed, not rudely, the way animals sniff smoke when the wind shifts. "Unclean hunger has a scent," he murmured, almost kindly. "Clean fire does not sit in the gut like a thief. Clean fire is tended, named, and kept outside the body, where doctrine can see it." I nodded like a believer of whatever kept his hands off my satchel. Inside, the hollow rolled hard, sensing a future argument with men who thought they owned flame. I tasted copper that was not overfill, only anger. Anger is another way to leak. I banked it. Doctrine is a map drawn by men afraid of wild heat. I wanted to say. I said instead that the high road teaches respect for any fire that can cook a leg. He smiled without warmth. Respect is not ownership. Ownership of skyfire belongs to the temple and the throne that funds it. Things that swallow lightning without license become lessons. Lessons are often ash. We walked. Hoofprints of earlier traffic made little cups of shadow in the dust. A hawk turned overhead in slow, lazy claim. I watched the hawk because watching him too long would be a confession of attention. He asked where I slept, what I ate, whether I dreamed of brightness. Fishing questions. I answered with boredom, sheds, lentils, no dreams worth temple ink. He did not believe me. Belief was not required for him to file me under later. At a fork, he took the left toward a white smudge of temple walls on a far rise. I took the right toward ordinary forts and ordinary pay. Before he left, he touched 2 fingers to his brow. "If hunger grows, come before we come for you." Confession buys cleaner endings than discovery. I thanked him for the blessing he thought he had given, and ran until his robe was a pale grain in distance. Then I stopped in a stand of scrub and released a controlled ribbon into barren dirt until my hands stopped shaking. The scorch line looked like a frown. I buried it. Priest smell stayed in my nose longer than smoke. Ash, oil, certainty. Certainty is a weapon. It lets men sleep after they burn strangers. That night at a way fort, I overheard soldiers talking about a temple audit of roadside shrines, unauthorized flames, suspicious healings, a boy in a lower village who supposedly lit wet wood with a stare and was taken up-road in a covered cart. The soldiers laughed nervously and drank. I did not laugh. Covered carts are how empires move problems that still breathe. I lay awake mapping exits from every fort I used, not running yet, preparing the idea of running. The second stomach made me valuable. Value attracts collars. Collars come first as kindness, then as law, then as chain. Rostam's warning returned. Heads that glow get collected. I pressed my palms to my eyes until sparks that were only flesh sparks danced. When I lowered my hands, the shed was still dark and ordinary and full of men who would sell a story for a cup of better wine. I decided then that if the temple courier returned with friends, I would not demonstrate. Demonstration is a gift to the enemy's memory. I would vanish into night roots and cloud cover, and the old animal cunning the hollow could not eat. If vanishing failed, I would aim carefully. Aim still required practice. Practice still required secrecy. Secrecy still required the face of a slightly stupid runner who believed weather was weather. I practiced that face in the dark until it fit without cracking. After the courier left, I replayed every sentence for hooks: storm runner, unclean hunger, license, lessons that are ash, confession buys cleaner endings. Each phrase was a fence post around a pen he expected me to enter gratefully. I would not enter. I changed small habits that day. Different well, different time through the market, different side of the road when passing white walls. Pattern is what hunters buy when they cannot buy your name yet. Break pattern early, while the net is still rope on a cart and not around your throat. At the Wayfort shrine, I watched a junior priest light clean fire with oil and prayer. The flame was ordinary chemistry dressed as virtue. People knelt. I stood at the back with travelers and kept my face arranged in mild respect. Inside, the hollow rolled once, unimpressed. Good. Let it stay unimpressed, or toward their fire would be the first surrender. That night, I dreamed the courier opened my chest like a satchel and held up the hollow to a temple court while clerks took notes. I woke biting down on a release that almost became real light in the shed. I swallowed it, sweat-soaked, silent. The man on the next pallet muttered and turned over, never knowing how close he came to a new religion or a new corpse. I did not sleep again. I cleaned my knife instead. I asked a market scribe what a temple audit cost a village. He said offerings, confessions, and sometimes a person who burned wrong. Wrong was a flexible word. Flexible words hang people. I bought no writing from him. I bought salt and left. Salt is honest. It preserves and stings and does not pretend to be virtue. Along the road, I rubbed a pinch on my cracked lips until they looked like work damage instead of forge kisses. The sting kept me present. Present men notice grey riders before grey riders notice them. I left the Wayfort on a side path used by dung carts and children, not couriers. Dignity is optional. Breathing is not. When white walls finally sank behind a ridge, I spat into dust and watched it dry without steam. Control held. For now, that was the whole victory. I wrote the laws in step rhythm until they outran panic. First law, never release near allies until aim is a habit. Heat does not know friendship. A ribbon meant for an enemy's shield can kiss a friend's sleeve and turn loyalty into a corpse and a story that ends with my name on a warrant. Second law, never fill to the brim where enemies can bait another strike. Overfill cooks the pot. A full second stomach makes the world copper and the mind slow. Slow men with dangerous guts are exactly what temples and captains dream of collaring. Leave room, leave a margin. Margin is life. Third law, never explain. Explanation is a leash handed over politely. The moment I name what I can do in a courtyard, I become public property with better branding. Let them call me demon in taverns. Tavern demons die of exaggeration. Explained weapons get inventoried. Fourth law, earned on the cloud night. Starvation does not end me. When sky is denied, feet and knife and path memory remain. If I forget the older self, the newer hunger will walk me into any trap that smells like lightning. Fifth law, earned from melted nail heads. Metal calls sky. Keep iron off the heart line in storms. Wrap tools, choose stone and leather where I can. The world is full of invitations written in ore. I repeated them on the long south grade until sweat salted my eyes and the words felt as real as the strap on my shoulder. Laws are useless if they only live in comfort. They must live in burn and breath. To test aim, I set stones on a ledge at 20 paces and blackened them one by one with needles of heat, never letting the release bloom wider than a finger. Misses taught me wind. Near misses taught me humility. Hits taught me that pride wants wider releases and must be refused. Once I pushed too hard and a stone cracked with a sound like a tooth breaking. Fragments stung my shin. I sat and laughed because pain is a tutor that does not flatter. The hollow surged, offering more, always more. I gave it nothing for a full 100 counts. Training the appetite mattered as much as training the hand. At a caravanserai, I paid for wall space and listened to merchants argue insurance against bandits. One mentioned the switchback devil with second-hand ore. Another said the fort captains would soon post a bounty for anything that smelled of unclean fire. A third spat and said bounties only feed liars. I ate flatbread and memorized the bounty talk without letting my face change. Laws need updates as the world moves. If bounties came, sixth law would be, do not linger where mirrors and polished bronze can throw my release into crowds. I did not have that law yet in clean words, but the seed of it sat in the priest's charcoal eyes. I slept poorly and woke to practice small sips at sunrise, always stopping before copper. The stop is the law made flesh. Anyone can begin a feast. The rare animal is the one that leaves the table while food still steams. Varam, when I next stood in his office, said I looked leaner and meaner. Good, he said. Mean runners finish. He handed seals and a warning. Temple men are sniffing the road. If they ask you questions, answer short and boring. Boring lives longer. Yes, Captain, he almost smiled. Almost is as close as Varam came to affection. I left before the almost could become a question. Outside, noon waited like a loaded cart. I sipped 2 heartbeats, stored, and ran. The laws ticked with my steps. Never near allies, never to the brim, never explain, starve and still move. Metal is a door, stop while you can still stop. If I failed a law, I would not fail quietly. Failure would be smoke visible for leagues. So I did not plan to fail. I planned to be the late post that arrives, delivers, and leaves before anyone decides I am interesting. Interesting is a synonym for hunted. I stress-tested the laws. Near a friendly mule driver who had shared water, I felt the urge to show a spark as thanks and payment. First law blocked it. I paid him a copper instead. He was happier with copper. Sparks do not buy grain. At a ridge where noon poured hard, I felt the urge to fill until the ache became pressure and the pressure became invincibility. Second law blocked it. I stopped at heavy safe and watched copper stay away. Invincibility is a story told by men about to become craters. When a child asked if I was the fireman from the Switchback songs, third law blocked the clever denial that would have proven too much knowledge. I said songs lie and kept walking. The child looked disappointed. Disappointment is safer than belief. On a cloudy noon, I ran empty on purpose for an hour to rehearse fourth law. Knife weight, foot placement, breath count. The hollow complained. I did not die. The complaint became quieter. Good training. Fifth law bit when I grabbed a fallen iron hook on the road to clear it for a cart. Heat leapt in my palm as if the hook had been waiting. I dropped it, wrapped my hand, and kicked the hook aside with sandal leather only. The cart driver thanked me. I thanked the law. Laws are not holiness. Holiness is what temples sell. Laws are how I keep my name off ash reports. I added a working note under the fifth law, not yet clean enough to count as sixth. If polished bronze and standing water can throw light, they can throw blame. Avoid courtyards full of shields when hot. Avoid bathhouses with bright bowls. Fight in dust, scrub, and matte stone when choice exists. Choice will not always exist. That is why aim must become habit before crisis, not during it. I drilled aim until my eyes watered and the ledge stones looked like a row of black teeth. Then I stopped, because stopping is the law that keeps all other laws possible. By evening, the laws had tempo. Step left, never near allies. Step right, never to the brim. Breath in, never explain. Breath out, starve and still move. Strike heel, metal is a door. Pause, stop while you can stop. I entered Vahram's fort, moving like a man with a song stuck in his feet, and no need to share the lyrics. I wanted more than surviving posts. I wanted the high road to flinch when my shadow passed. I wanted kings to bargain with weather that had my name folded inside it. I wanted the men who paid in dust bread and policy threats to feel their seals arrive early, because the road itself had grown a guardian they did not employ and could not fire. Want made my hands hotter. I cooled them in a horse trough outside a village shrine and apologized to the horse for the hiss. The animal backed until Rope stopped it, eyes wide. I left before the owner came to ask why his water steamed. Power fantasy is honest only if you admit the size of the want. Mine was plateau-wide. Endgame shape, if I let myself see it, was day-dimming terror, a sky with a bite taken out of it and armies looking up too late. I was not there. I was a runner with a second stomach and a handful of laws. Between here and there lay priests, captains, rival hungers, and my own overfilled death if I got stupid. I sat on a stone wall and watched children chase a hoop through dust. One fell, cried, rose, ran again. Simple loop. My loop had become swallow, store, aim, hide, repeat. The child's hoop made more sense. I still would not trade. A woman selling dried apricots asked if I was ill. Your color, she said, like fever under brown. I bought apricots and told her the road does that. She packed extra in my palm and refused the second copper. Kindness without a ledger unsettled me more than threats. I did not know where to put it. I put it in my mouth and tasted ordinary sugar and sun. Want is not only empire scale. Want is also never again crawling because a spearman said crawl. Want is my mother, if she still lived somewhere west, hearing no more tax stories that end with empty pens. Want is not becoming the covered cart boy with a stare that lit wet wood. I tested a larger release that evening in a dry canyon off-road, far from roofs. The ribbon that left my hand was brighter than anything I had allowed near men. It painted a black stroke up the canyon wall and glassed a palm-sized patch of sand into something that looked like frozen honey. Heat slapped back into my face. The hollow dropped hard toward empty. I staggered, drank water, sat until the shake left my knees. Too much spend left me weak. Weak with a famous scorch is how legends die mid-sentence. I scuffed the glass under dirt and rocks until it looked like ordinary canyon trash. Then I climbed out under evening light and sipped just enough noon residue to stop my hands from betraying me at the next gate. What I wanted included control equal to appetite. Without that, want was only a prettier word for suicide by glory. At the fort, Rostam found me again near the well. Temple sniffers asked after storm runners by description, he said. Lean, burned mouth, smells like forge after rain. You should grow a beard and limp. I told him I would consider the limp. He did not smile. I am not your friend, he said. I am a man who hates watching the temple collect tools. Tools break in their hands, and then they blame the metal. After he left, I touched my bare chin and considered the beard. Disguise is a kind of law, too. Change the silhouette, change the road, do not change the silence. Night pressed down. I lay on straw and let want fill my chest beside the hollow. 2 heats, 1 human, 1 stolen. I named the human one so it would not pretend to be holy. Ambition. Ambition can be scheduled. Ambition can wait for better terrain. If the sky itself came jealous, we would argue in lightning until one of us blinked. I was not ready for that argument. Readiness was the true object of want, not the crown of ash songs promise fools. I slept and dreamed of a day so bright it had to answer me, and in the dream I did not gorge. I asked. The day, amused, poured a careful cup. I woke with cracked lips and hid the smile before the yard could tax it. I sorted want into near and far. Near survived temple sniffers, mastered 2 heartbeat sips, aim at 20 paces in wind, keep Varam bored, keep Rostam from having to choose between me and his peace. Far, make the royal road negotiate with me as if I were weather. Not a crown. Crowns are cages with better seats. Open road power. Choose when to dim a day over a column that deserves fear. Choose when to stay a rumor. Far want can poison near work if you let it sit in the hands. I cooled my hands again and again, trough after trough, until horses stopped hissing and I learned the temperature of enough. I thought of the bandit's eyes when the spear softened. That fear was a tool. Tools can become cruelty without noticing. I added a quiet clause to want. Do not become the empire I hate with different lighting. Hard clause. Easy to break when someone chains you. I repeated it anyway. A traveling singer in the yard sang a comic verse about a devil who delivered mail on time. Men laughed. I laughed. Inside, want flinched at being named even sideways. Then it settled, sharper. Let them sing. Songs are smoke. I was building lungs. Before dawn, I whispered the near wants like a packing list. Water, seals, wrapped nails, laws, distance. Far wants I left unnamed in open air. Naming far wants aloud is how the plateau learns to tax them. I touched the horse trough one last time with cooled hands and earned no hiss. Small victory. Small victories are how large hungers stay employable. Then I ran before the yard could see me smile. Want without schedule is how overfill starts in the mind before it starts in the gut. I scheduled want like posts. Near wants daily, far wants only at night under cloth. If a noon thirst tried to wear ambition's face, I named it appetite and denied it a third heartbeat. Names matter when the thing inside you can burn stone. Before sleep on the 6th night after the first bolt, I touched the coin-black burn still ghosting the runner's shed wall, where my earliest bead of heat had kissed clay. Someone had tried to scrub it. The scrub had only widened the stain into a dull bloom. I felt proud as a thief and afraid as a witness. Tomorrow's road would look the same to dull eyes. To me, it was a table where sky could be eaten and spent. I began to keep a map in my head that no clerk would ever copy. Wash where lightning entered, switchback where bandits learned, canyon where glass hid under dirt, alley where the sand bowl cracked. Each mark a lesson, each lesson a scorch. Maps made of scorch are dangerous if shared. They are necessary if you intend to survive your own education. I walked the fort yard at dusk, counting exits, water, metal hazards, sightlines from the tower. Habit of a hunted animal. Habit of a man who refuses to be only hunted. A boy swept near the shed and asked why that wall spot would not come clean. Old lamp accident, I said. He accepted it. Children accept lamp accidents until they grow into men who start asking better questions. I needed to be gone up rank in skill before the boy became such a man. I took charcoal from a cold brazier and, in private, marked a scrap of leather with dots only I could read. Not places of power, places of mistake. Mistake maps keep you humble. Humble keeps you breathing. Vahram called me in after full dark, unusual. He lit no extra lamp. Temple inquiry came by sealed note, he said. Not naming you, naming a pattern. Burned bandits, storm stink runner, forge smell without forge. If they send a reader of ashes, I will not hide you. I also will not gift wrap you. Run your routes, stay boring. If you are more than boring, do it far from my walls. Yes, Captain. He held my gaze. I do not want a weapon that answers to me, he said softly. Weapons that answer become excuses when they fail. I want posts on time. Can you still be posts on time? I can, I said, and meant it. The promise of the chapter was not empire yet. It was survival of the first swallow and the first ambush burned. I had paid that promise. What came next would be other men's promises colliding with my gut. Outside, the yard torch smoke twisted. I went to the shed, lay down, and placed a wet cloth on my chest out of habit. The hollow pulsed against the cloth and warmed it dry in a dozen breaths. I turned it, wet it again from my skin, repeated until sleep took me sideways into a dream of maps drawn in light on the underside of clouds. I woke before the horn with the taste of ash that was only memory. My leather scrap of mistakes sat in the satchel under seals I would carry at dawn. Ordinary cargo above, true cargo below, next to the heart. On the wall walk, for one foolish minute, I watched the dark plateau and imagined scorch marks connecting into a constellation only I could use. Then I imagined temple readers connecting them faster. I went back down the ladder carefully, each rung a refusal of romance. Romance gets you collected. I wanted the map. I wanted it invisible. Holding both wants without tearing is the real craft beneath the heat. I expanded the mental map beyond Scorch. Water sources that hid a man at noon, gullies that hid a man at night, forts with lazy gate watches, forts with clever ones, temples visible as white teeth on rises, crosswinds that would push a heat ribbon off target, places where polished shields of patrols might throw my own release back into my face someday. The leather scrap of mistakes gained 2 more dots burned tiny with a pin of heat under blanket cover, one for almost showing Rostam, one for the spear tip left under the ledge. I would retrieve that tip if the loop allowed. If not, rain and time would have to be allies. Vahram's warning about ash readers sat on the map like a red mark without a place. Mobile threat, worst kind. You cannot outrun a kind of person, only outdecide them. Before dawn, I walked the shed wall stain once more with my eyes only. Pride said keep it. Sense said it should be plastered over. I could not plaster without questions, so I left it as lamp accident and accepted the risk as rent owed to my earliest carelessness. Maps do not forgive, they only remind. I slept with the scrap under my cheek and dreamed of roads that rearranged to erase my marks, while temple clerks redrew them faster. I woke angry and used the anger to run harder on the morning leg, a clean conversion of feeling into distance. I tried to retrieve the spear tip on a stolen half-hour from a local loop. The ledge still held a dark glint. Grey rider tracks ringed the bend like a signature. I left the tip where it lay and added a new mistake dot to the lever, returning to trophies. Curiosity toward my own legend is bait shaped like pride. I ran from it with my mouth shut and my map heavier by one hard lesson. I redrew the map once in pure memory while staring at blank wall, then again while running, then a third time before sleep. Each pass added a cost: legs, time, fear. Maps that cost nothing are toys. This one cost enough to obey. When the horn sounded, I rose knowing where not to stand, where not to glow, and where a lamp accident stain still accused me in silence I could not plaster away. I accepted that some marks cannot be unmade, only outpaced. The shed stain would remain until weather or workman erased it without my help. My task was to be leagues away in skill before either happened. Distance in power, distance on road. Both kinds of distance buy time, and time is the only currency ash readers cannot confiscate at a gate. Time matters. Rumor grows legs, then it grows a seal. I learned that at a waypost where a Royal Road clerk copied reports for a provincial tally. He drank too much date wine and talked too freely to a runner he thought harmless. Something about burn patterns on a switchback. Something about a courier who should have been ash and was not. Something about temple interest matching garrison interest for once, which meant money would move. Money moving is how smoke becomes policy. I did not react. Reacting is a signature. I slept in the waypost loft and left before dawn with another man's root scrap borrowed from a nail where schedules hung. Not theft of seals, theft of timing. I wanted off-predictable intervals. On the high saddle by mid-morning I saw them. 2 riders in mixed colors, not full temple white, not full garrison blue, the grey compromise of men sent to look without yet arresting. They asked a shepherd questions. The shepherd pointed along roads. One road was mine if I stayed stupid. I cut down through scrub on goat tracks that tore my calves and saved my name. Thorns wrote new lines on my arms. I welcomed the ordinary blood. Ordinary blood explains limping better than fear does. From a ridge, I watched the grey riders reach the place I would have been. They dismounted. One crouched over dirt like a hound, reader of ashes maybe, or just a tracker with temple pay. He lifted something small. Melted metal caught sun for a blink. My spear tip mistake, or another. The hollow surged with the urge to erase them both into black glass. I did not. Fifth law's cousin spoke. Do not write larger scorch to hide smaller scorch while witnesses have fresh horses. I backed down the ridge and ran a longer loop that cost me half a day and bought me anonymity. At the next fort, the gate watch had new orders. All runners examined for burns about the mouth. I scrubbed with grit and oil until my lips cracked clean red instead of black. Painful, convincing. The watchman squeezed my jaw, frowned, waved me through. Another runner behind me had a cold sore and got delayed for a priest's opinion. I did not wait to learn the opinion. Inside, gossip had sharpened. Bounty talk. Not official. Trial balloon. Bring proof of unclean fire on the road. Earn silver. Earn favor. Proof might mean a person still breathing. I heard my description in pieces that did not yet lock. Lean, fast, smells wrong after storms. Pieces are how nets start. I found Rostam oiling a spearhead. He did not look up. Leave tonight, he said. Not desertion. Request the long eastern loop. Take plague route credit if you must. Be gone when the grey ones arrive. If Varam asks, you are eager for pay. Why help me? I asked. Because I burned a shrine once by accident in a siege and spent 3 years scrubbing temple steps for it, he said. I know the smell of men who think fire is morality. Go. I went to Varam with a face full of hungry obedience and asked for the long loop. He studied me, then the doorway, then me again. Granted. Do not make me regret paper. I would try not to make him regret paper. Paper is how boring men survive interesting times. That night, before I left, smoke from a signal fire rose far west. 3 short plumes. Not my code, garrison code for attend and report. The temple fort conversation had climbed from rumor to coordination. Promise of the first chapter was paid. Lightning swallowed, ambush burned, appetite awake under law. The cliff was this, notice, attention with horses, attention with doctrine. I adjusted the satchel, nails long wrapped, seals ordinary, gut extraordinary, and stepped into dark that still held no stars under fresh cloud. Empty hollow, knife ready, feet sure. If they wanted a demon, they would have to catch a late post first. Behind me, smoke climbed the road like a finger pointing along my track. Ahead, the open dark refused to promise anything except distance, and distance would have to be enough until noon gave me teeth again. Coordination between temple and garrison is rarer than honest dice. When it happens, someone important has decided a rumor is cheaper to kill than to ignore. I treated the Grey Riders as weather. You do not punch weather. You read it and change clothes. My new clothes were goat tracks, off-schedule departures, scrubbed lips, long loops, and Rostam's unfriendly mercy. At a ford, I paid a fisher girl a copper to say she saw a burned-mouth runner go west if anyone asked. I went east, cheap misdirection. Maybe useless, maybe enough to split a search. Signal smoke on the western sky stayed in my mind's eye after night fell. 3 plumes, attend and report. I imagined tablets moving with my description locking together from pieces into a full silhouette. Lean endurance build, short black hair, courier leather, satchel scars, storm stink. The silhouette was getting denser. Promise paid, I reminded myself. Lightning, swallow, ambush burned, appetite under law. The episode's debt to the listener was clear. The cliff was honest, notice had begun, and notice has teeth. I ran into the clouded dark with empty gut and full attention, a late post once more, carrying ordinary seals toward a future that had finally turned its head to look. Cloud sealed the stars as I left, a mercy and a tax. Mercy, harder tracking. Tax, empty gut. I accepted both. The road under cloud is an old friend to men who learned feet before fire. I let that older friendship lead. Behind me, policy woke. Ahead of me, only the next marker stone, and the promise that noon would come even if empire came with it. I did not pray. I counted steps until counting became running, and running became the only doctrine I trusted. I whispered the chapter's kept promise to the dark like a seal pressed shut. Lightning taken. Ambush burned. Second stomach awake and leashed. Then I named the cliff without flinching. Priest smell on the wind, empire smoke on the road, Grey Riders combing schedules. The story would continue whether I slept or not. I slept in pieces anyway, knife in hand, ember banked, ready to be only footsteps when hooves returned. At first light, the cloud tore and the eastward road turned into a strip of hammered copper. I ran with ordinary seals and an extraordinary gut. Every metal tip on passing harnesses glittered like food. I did not feast, I stored a little, I left a little. Control is how monsters become legends instead of cautionary ash stains. The long loop stretched ahead through scrub plateaus, salt margins, and 2 forts that knew me only as a name on tally sticks. Good. Names on sticks are thinner than faces in yards. I sipped noon at a safe count, felt the hollow settle heavy and obedient, and tested a finger-width release into a stone that would not care. Black mark, no bloom, stop. The stop still felt like refusing wine at a wedding. I refused anyway. If bandits came again, they would learn the late post had become early death. If captains came with chains, they would learn chains melt. If priests came with clean doctrine, they would learn unclean hunger still aims. If the sky itself came jealous, we would argue in lightning until one of us blinked. None of that was today's work. Today's work was distance. I passed the switchback near evening on purpose, a risk taken to erase a fear. The bend was empty, dirt disturbed by many hooves since my fight, grey riders or scavengers or both. I did not linger. I kicked loose stones over any dark patch that might still remember heat and moved on with my face dull. A shepherd boy waved from a slope. I waved back. He shouted that men with mixed colors were offering coin for stories of fire that walked. I shouted that he should take their coin and sell them goat songs. He laughed. Children laugh until coin teaches them betrayal. I hoped he stayed a child one more season. Night camp was a scrape under an overhang. No fire. I needed no fire. The hollow was a banked ember that could have cooked a meal and would not, because light is a flag. I ate cold bread, drank skin water, and recited laws until sleep. Near midnight, hoofbeats moved on the road below, unhurried, confident. 2 horses, voices low. I smelled oil and ash on the wind, and knew priest-adjacent men were riding my former schedule like a comb. They passed. I did not glow. I did not breathe heat. I was stone among stones until silence reclaimed the dark. After they went, I allowed myself one small smile in the black. Hunted is not caught. Caught is a different chapter. Dawn again, sip again, run again. The plateau unfolded its old indifference, which I now read as cover. Indifferent land hides what it does not love. I was not loved by stone. I was tolerated. Tolerance is a kind of shelter. My body catalogued costs. Lips cracked, sleep thin. Appetite for sky always half a thought from mutiny. Overfill risk a constant neighbor. These were the prices. I paid them the way I paid blisters, without drama, with attention. At a salt ford, I met a runner coming the other way, a woman named Shirin with a limp and a grin. "Temple dogs are out," she said without greeting. "Don't be interesting." I told her I had never managed interesting in my life. She snorted, traded me a handful of dates for nothing, and limped west toward the smoke of other people's attention. I went east toward less. By high sun, the fort that marked the loop's first official stamp rose like a brown tooth. I would enter, deliver, become tally mark, leave, boring as water. Inside my chest, the second stomach turned, tasting noon through my ribs, patient as a sealed coal. I was still Ardash, still paid in dust bread, still a late post when weather demanded. I was also something the tablets had no sign for yet. I adjusted the satchel strap, sinew honest, nail wrapped, seals snug, and started the last stretch as if ordinary life still owned me. It did not, but it could watch me run a while longer, until the day I chose to teach the sky my name on purpose, and until the Empire's pointing smoke found only empty road and the smell of rain where a storm eater had already passed. I ran. Behind my heart, the ember waited for the next honest noon, the next stupid ambush, the next priest who thought fire could be licensed. I would meet them on my schedule, with room left under the brim, with aim trained, with silence held like a second satchel no clerk could inventory. The high road opened. I took it. Heat ticked in time with my feet, not master, not slave, something newer. A weapon learning the hand that held it, a hunger learning the law, a late post becoming the weather that arrives exactly when it means to. I used the open road to rehearse endings I hoped to avoid, and endings I hoped to earn. Avoid covered cart, temple steps, overfill crater, chain collar under a captain who smiles. Earn chosen storms, noon on a leash, rivals forced to share sky, an empire that writes my absence into its delays and does not know why. Rehearsal is not prophecy, it is stretch work for the will. When the mixed color riders passed under my overhang, rehearsal kept the hollow shut. That alone justified every boring law. Shirin's dates tasted like clean, ordinary life. I ate them slowly. Ordinary life is not the enemy. Ordinary life is the camouflage and the reason. Without it, power is only appetite wearing boots. At the Brown-Tooth Fort, I would stamp seals, drink bad water, answer no interesting questions, and leave before grey riders combed this far. If they arrived while I stood in a yard, I would be a runner with cracked lips and a limp borrowed from Rostam's advice. If they arrived after I left, they would get dust. I touched my chest once at the run's last mile. Ember answered, not master, not slave, partner with teeth. I can work with that. The high road held its old silence. I added my footsteps to it and did not look west where smoke had pointed. Looking forward is also a discipline. I kept it, heat ticking time with feet, seals snug, name still mine.